external oppressors in the world. So that began both a spiritual and a political journey for me. I checked out an English translation of the Quran because Malcolm was a Muslim, and I converted to Islam before the week was out. That was my initiation into my personal faith tradition, but also into the Black radical tradition and the Black radical political tradition. And I'll be blunt about the fact that for most of my life, my political organizing, my activist work, my community building work, my community educational work was not centered around electoral politics. Because I'm somebody that has been active in community and building community. I believe in mutual aid. I believe in direct action. I believe in community education. Those are the things that have centered and anchored my social interventions throughout my career. And so I teach African history, I teach Islamic history, I teach the history of anti-capitalist revolution, I teach a course called Black Revolutionaries, and I've been doing those things inside community environments as well as university classroom environments. I'm greeting y'all from my UCSB office. Just because this was the place where I was for sure to get a quiet room. My son is autistic, has special needs, so he was definitely not going to let me record this one from home. So I'm here at my campus office delivering this message. And the short version is that I was called to reassess the role of electoral politics in our liberation agenda when Dr. Jill Stein asked me if I would consider running as the vice president. And so, quite literally, at age 51 last year was the first time in my life that I seriously considered focusing my community work around an electoral political intervention. And in that moment, when I was issued that invitation, I went back to Malcolm and I went back to all of the other Black liberation teachers and activists that I have always been my heroes and role models and mentors. Like I was teaching a Pan-African, Marxist revolutionary book club when I was 19 years old, right? I mean, that conversion at 15 had me on one for a while, and I've been on that, same kind of run throughout my whole life. So I went back to Malcolm, and I went back to the Ballot of the Bullet, 1964, and this takes us into the heart of the question that you guys have asked for us to address today. So first of all, just can I get a show of hands? What you guys have heard of this speech, the Ballot of the Bullet? Raise your hand.
Got
a few.
4 hands, 5
and
hands.
What outstanding. So how do you understand the basic argument? And it's right there in the title. If I could just pull people into a conversation about this.
Kira, why don't you take that one?
Do I really have to?
Oh, come on, you're gonna kill it.
I'm a little nervy,
Come on.
to be honest. I prefer someone else started, I'm not gonna lie.
All right. Yeah, so for me, Ballot or the Bullet is kind of like a recognition that, electoral politics, they traditionally have not always solved everything, but they can be a very effective tool. And, I've seen two different kind of interpretations of it. One being like literally the ballot or the bullet, we can, if you we can use the electoral system to bring about political change. And if that is made impossible for us, then that makes, the bullet inevitable. Or also, I've seen a Malcolm X quote where he's phrasing ballots as bullets as like a key tool to bring about revolutionary change as well.
Outstanding. So I think it was probably John F. Kennedy that said that whoever makes peaceful revolution impossible makes violent revolution inevitable. And that's coming straight out of the mouth of a 1960s white liberal. So that means that Stevie Wonder can see it. Anybody can see that if you cut off the path to revolutionary change through peaceful means, then you are essentially guaranteeing that people will take up quote unquote violent means in order to achieve their liberation. And just for clarity, Malcolm always said that resistance to violent systems of oppression are not violence. He said, we don't call it violence when you resist violence against you. We call it intelligence, is what he said, right? That this is just a basic natural, innate human reaction. And we understand that the systems in which we are embedded, the systems of exploitation, capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, these things are profoundly violent. They destroy our capacity for our meeting our basic needs. They destroy our capacity for meeting our basic emotional needs, our basic spiritual needs, our basic material needs. They are a perpetual state of warfare against our very humanity. So therefore, we have to resist them, and we have to resist them, as Malcolm was wont to say, by all means necessary. So that is something that is embedded in the argument in the ballot or the bullet. The ballot or the bullet is an ultimatum. It is saying, if you do not give us the capacity to fundamentally transform our reality through the political means that you leave at our disposal, then you are going to be at the other end, at the business end of a revolver, because you are making it impossible for us to achieve basic human dignity and liberation except through direct physical armed struggle. So that's the primary meaning of the ballot or the bullet. It is an ultimatum, but as you alluded to, it's also creating an equivalency between these two different mechanisms. They both become tools or weapons that can be used as a means towards an end, and that end is collective liberation, because there's actually another secondary meaning of the ballot or the bullet that is embedded in Malcolm's speech. And just for those that want to dig into the lore, there's at least 2 times that Malcolm in 1964 where Malcolm delivers a speech that he calls the ballot or the bullet. There may actually have been more, but we have 2 surviving tapes. And in one of them, Malcolm says very clearly, and I want you guys to if you walk away with nothing else from this interaction, have this ringing in your ears. Malcolm said in 64, he said, we are going to knock on every door in Harlem, and we are going to register every Black face behind every door, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican, but as an independent. And whoever's behind any of those doors that doesn't have the responsibility to register themselves to vote, then we are going to have strong words for them, or we might just run them out of town on a rail. That's what he said. Now, I want you to juxtapose that position against the way that some so-called leftists in our community nowadays will tell people that electoral politics is a waste of time, because what Malcolm was saying is that the ballot or the bullet is not just an ultimatum to white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist America. It is also an ultimatum to all of those who are oppressed and marginalized, who will leave a tool of potential liberation in their toolkit and not use it, who will leave a weapon, a form of ammunition that they possess without having fired it. He said that we are going to run you out of town on a rail if you do not register. Now, he wasn't talking about registering inside this duopoly. And about that duopoly, you know, Team Blue and Team Red, it was another great African revolutionary, Julius Nyerere, first president of Tanzania, who said, of course, the United States is a single party state, but with classic American extravagance, they have 2 of them, right? The idea is, yes, this is one capitalist party, one imperialist party, one white supremacist party, and it's got 2 flavors. You can choose blue or you can choose red. And Malcolm was not saying utilize your electoral political organizing in order to weigh in on one side or the other of that divide, because that was a false divide as far as Malcolm understood it. Malcolm said in earlier speeches before the ballot or the bullet, he said, the liberal is a fox. It bares its teeth. You think that it's smiling at you, but you are on the menu. The conservative is a wolf. When it bares its teeth, it's into a vicious snarl that leaves the Black man with no illusion as to where he stands. So Malcolm's understanding was that the Black community, and therefore every oppressed and marginalized community, that includes working class communities, is caught between 2 predators that differ primarily in the modality of the hunt. One hunts by guile, that's the fox. It pretends to be the friend of the oppressed person. but ultimately it is there to consume the oppressed person. The wolf, on the other hand, just snarls, growls, lets you know why it is there. But make no mistake, Malcolm also said, and he said this in 64, he said the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere. Malcolm concluded that that Democrat version, that blue version, that liberal version of capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy was more dangerous. And it was for a simple rationale. It's a concealed enemy. It's an enemy that pretends to be your friend, but you are on the menu. And if we look at the moment that we're in right now, 2025, people are responding to the Trump phenomenon. Many folks, unfortunately, are thinking that they can put their lot in with Team Blue in order to protect themselves against Trump, right? We have these no kings and no demands, no asks, no pressure, no disruption. Change the name of those marches, right? And I'm sorry if I'm going, too deep in on the Democrat chicanery, but we have this performative resistance that is actually, in point of fact, no resistance at all. So, what I would add to Malcolm's discussion of the Malcolm liked to use agrarian metaphors, the fox and the wolf and so forth. I'm going to give you guys another one. And this is particularly relevant for our moment, especially for so many people who, after Zoran Mamdani's victory in New York, might be contemplating that the Democrat structure is the best way to resist the rise of fascism. And I'll just put it this way. A sheep is going to spend its entire life living in fear of a wolf, only to be eaten by the shepherd. Do y'all understand? Team Blue is fear-mongering you about the fascist that's over there and saying, stay close to me. Stay close here where it's safe. I'm going to protect you from the big bad wolf that's out there. And that's the reason why structurally all the time they are simply offering themselves as a lesser of two evils, an electoral alternative to overt and direct fascism. Now back to Malcolm. Malcolm said the white liberal is the most dangerous thing in the Western Hemisphere at a time in 1964 when white conservatives were hanging black people from trees, when white conservatives were putting bullets in the brains of white voting rights activists in Mississippi and burying them in shallow graves next to back roads in the woods. They were turning dogs and fire hoses on protesters. And Malcolm said what he said, and he was not wrong, even in this moment where the enemy looks like it's over there wearing Team Red, and Team Red is an open enemy to all liberation. The more dangerous thing is surrendering your power voluntarily to a supposed shepherd that is fattening you for the slaughter, or in our case, in this moment, even starving us as we head to the slaughter, because they offer less and less. They simply respond to the same basic donor class. Back to Malcolm, again in 64. He said of the Democrats to the black community, and go out and say this to the Mexican American community in this state. Go out and say this to the LGBTQ community in this state, to the trans community in this state, to the working people of this state. Malcolm said of the Democrats, you put them first and they put you last. And that makes you a chump. That makes you a political chump. How much have we put this particular party, Team Blue, as a priority, as a supposed way out for oppressed communities? And yet what remains of the promises that they have made? Women's right to choose, gone, right? Affirmative action, gone. DEI, gone. There is nothing left because they were never there to protect it in the first place. They were just keeping you close, trying to keep you from wandering off. So the last thing that I'm going to say, and then I want to open things for questions and engagement and conversation, is that Malcolm was saying, yes, this electoral system, this Democrats versus Republicans, He sometimes referred to the Negro being a political football, constantly pulled back and forth in a never-ending football game between white liberals and white conservatives. And many of us can now see the way that our communities are just being used as a football in the game. He didn't want us organizing along those lines. Instead, he wanted us outside of that duopoly system and leveraging our power independently. And that is the way forward for electoral politics in our community. The Black Panthers, founded by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale in our great state of California, in the city of Oakland, in the 1960s, late 1960s, after Malcolm was assassinated. Huey P. Newton said this in Revolutionary Suicide. He said that we do not claim that we have done what Malcolm would have done, but we say that the spirit of Malcolm is with us. We were inspired by his example. The Panthers understood themselves as farming in a field that Malcolm had cleared. Now, how did the Panthers approach this? The Panthers focused on, yes, all of the community building work, the mutual aid and direct action, which is the focus of so much of our revolutionary liberation activities in this time. If you go to the Black Panther Party's 10-point program, the first 6 points are survival programs, survival pending revolution. And the Panthers gave us the first hot breakfast programs in the country. I was one of those kids growing up in DC eating a hot breakfast because the federal government got shamed into creating hot breakfast programs because the Panthers were giving kids free hot breakfast in Oakland and Chicago and in other cities around this country, to the point where the US government had to follow suit. The Panthers opened free medical clinics in 19 different US cities. And we still can't get health care for all underneath the Democrats, who are literally swimming in cash. But I digress. We are all, especially if we're in a gathering like this one that's focused on how we make revolutionary liberation changes in this moment, we tend to be folks that are more focused on mutual aid, because we don't see electoral politics as part of the solution to our problem, except that Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale took the exact same approach that Malcolm took. They insisted on utilizing electoral politics as part of their political leveraging work. Huey P. Newton ran for Congress not once, but twice. Bobby Seale ran for mayor of Oakland in 1973. They made a massive impact in especially the electoral politics in the city of Oakland. They didn't know. A revolutionary does not leave any revolutionary tools in the quiver without firing them. We use every single weapon that is at our disposal. Another person that studied from Malcolm in his life, the great Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael. So Stokely Carmichael started with Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, committed Marxist, as were the Panthers. It's worth mentioning, right? This is a Marxist-Leninist organization in both of those instances. Kwame Ture ends up founding the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and he continues political organizing. Now, Kwame Ture said, voting every 4 years is the height of bourgeois hypocrisy. Politics is every day. But he also said, but I would shed my blood for the vote, and I have. I mean, he was out there in Mississippi with SNCC in 64, risking his life. Why? He said, because I know the vote is how I can organize my people. See, political campaigns create opportunities for effective organization of the people. And that's why Malcolm was involved in voter registration drives, knocking on every door in Harlem. It wasn't just to produce an electoral outcome, but it was also designed to produce a social outcome. And if you've ever, you've seen, especially out in this environment, when a political campaign has this capacity to channel the people's energy towards concrete goals and towards concrete outcomes. Last thing that I'll say before I open things up to questions. Kwame Ture, who I just mentioned a moment ago, he said famously, revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. Revolutionaries don't just mobilize around issues, revolutionaries organize against systems. And the reason why I'm drilling down on this with my final word is that electoral political organizing can be a way that we channel people's energy from mobilization around specific siloed issues towards organization against the systems that oppress us all. I'll give just a couple concrete examples. In 2020, we saw the most mass mobilization against police brutality that has ever existed in the history of the planet. The Floyd uprisings, correct? Just nod your head if that sounds like it's about right. No one had ever seen white folks outnumbering black folks 5-1 at police brutality protests, correct? Mass mobilization, nothing like it had ever come before. And yet, it was not effective organization against the system that produced the violence. So Team Blue takes power and police kill more people in every single year since 2020. They've literally set a new record for police homicides in every single year since, despite the most mass mobilization that any of us have seen. Terrifying when you really think about it. 1 in 3 stranger homicides in the United States of America is when a police officer kills a civilian. 1 in 3. It's a kind of collective madness. We mobilized against this, but we didn't organize against the system. Since 2023, since October of 2023, we've seen the greatest mass mobilization for Palestinian liberation that any of us have ever seen. And those of us that have been 10 toes down for Palestinian liberation because Malcolm told us to in Zionist logic in 1964, he said, stand for the liberation of Palestine. Those of us that have been standing on this never thought that we would see this kind of mass popular rejection of the Zionist narrative. So many people willing to mass mobilize and say from the river to the sea. But mobilization around the issue rather than organization against the system. Even in the midst of a ceasefire, they continue to slaughter 30, 40, sometimes 100 people a day. None of us have ever seen more effective, no, let me not say effective, at larger scale mass mobilization against La Migra, against immigration authorities. Now it's ICE. It used to be other institutions. And people have been protesting, predominantly Mexican American communities and other immigrant communities for a long time. But we have seen, especially since Trump took office, mass mobilization for ICE abolition and for standing to protect marginalized communities. And yet again, mobilization around the issue rather than organization against the system. Well, what is the system that is productive of all 3 of those oppressive outcomes of the police brutality, of the imperialism abroad, of the creation of a Gestapo police? That is all capitalism, imperialism, and white supremacy. That is all coming straight out of that duopoly. That is all coming straight out of Team Blue and Team Red. We have to organize against the system. And electoral political organizing is one of the most effective ways that you can challenge for power. Last thing, very last thing that I'll say is that in this current environment where the things have changed in some ways since 64, the total takeover of our media environment, of our supposedly right and left wing political parties. They're just both right wing political parties, for the record. That the corporate takeover of those things is now much more complete than it was in 64. I would actually argue that electoral political tools are one of the more effective potential mechanisms for actually striking a blow at the heart of capitalist corporate power in this moment, because the takeover of other domains, the media domain, the social media domain, is now so total, but we still have these pesky elections. People can still vote the bums out. And if you put anti-Zionists, if you put abolitionists, if you put people that are committed to collective liberation in positions of elected political authority, then even if you're somebody that really believes that mutual aid is the way, then at least now you're going to have people in positions of authority who are not making the problems that the people face worse. Right? If you believe that mutual aid is the answer, not electoral politics, put me in the governor's mansion anyway, because at least I'm going to stop shoveling shit down on the people that you then, through your mutual aid activities, have to then get off of them. Imagine if our mutual aid activities were focused on maximizing human potential and bringing benefit to our societies rather than just struggling to get the harm off of people's heads. So that's what I have to say about the relationship between electoral politics and revolutionary activities, inspired by Malcolm's example in the Ballot of the Bullet, and by way of a few other African and African American revolutionaries in the midst of that conversation. And depending on how much time Gracie tells me we have left, I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, we have time for some questions.
Yeah, if anyone
Great.
question, just shoot your hand up. All right, yeah, maybe you can stand up and like face towards the camera so Butch can see you.
Hi, I have a question. So basically, I sort of walked in when you were talking about Tanzania and Julius Kambarage Nyerere. What exactly were you saying? Because I walked in right when you finished talking about him.
Yeah, no, all Julius Nyerere was saying was he was pointing out that while we tend to think of the American political system as being built around two parties, a liberal party and a conservative party, his argument was that there's actually just one capitalist party with two factions in it. So what he said specifically was he said that, of course, the United States is a single party state, but with classic American extravagance, they have two of them. And the way that I would illustrate this in our contemporary moment is that if you actually look at who the donors are to the Republican and the Democrat parties, they're the exact same donors. It's the reason why AIPAC and the Zionist lobby owns both parties, because they're principal donors to both parties. It's the reason why Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, 5 weapons manufacturers that are responsible for 60% of the US defense budget, which is really just the imperialism budget. Those are major donors to both parties. So the point is that while most people are divided in a kind of culture war between red and blue, the elite corporate class is actually sponsoring both parties and are happy for us to be divided by fake culture war issues so that we're never actually having a class war conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. Anyone else got a question they'd like to ask? Or?
Thank you for the question.
All right, seeing nothing. Actually, yeah, Anna, all you.
Well, my name is Anna Martinez. I was just wondering how, like, for advice for us, how do we mobilize against these systems when we're part of like the broader CSU system that is also very imperialist and capitalistic?
Excellent. This is so important. So the first thing to understand is that student power is incredibly important in resistance movements. Kwame Ture actually has whole videos where he talks about the importance of student organization. The reason is that student movements have consistently challenged imperialist authority and have frequently actually led to the direct overthrowing of governments, right? Think about the uprisings in Bangladesh just in the past year. Students got out into the street and would not go back up into the dorms, and that literally caused a dictator to go into flight, to disappear. And I just want you guys to understand that the reason for the massive repression against the Palestine encampments, not this past May, but the one before it, was precisely because that is what was going to happen to Joe Biden if those encampments continue to grow unchecked. Student power is incredibly important. If you guys organize not for episodic mobilization, but for actual organization, and this is a crucial distinction, make that distinction between mobilization and organization. Kwame Ture said mobilization is temporary and ephemeral. Organization is permanent and durable. That's what was so threatening about the encampments. The encampments were durable. That was what was threatening about the Occupy movement, is that those are not episodic mobilizations around an issue. Those create new sociability. I saw, the Muslim Students Association and, breaking bread with, the transgender students and other folks in those encampments, building whole new forms of community and sociability, creating alternative structures of resistance. So the biggest thing that I'll say is embrace your power as students and do everything that you can to shut things down, right? When we talk about direct action as part of that revolutionary cocktail, mutual aid, direct action, and electoral politics, one of the big issues that people are facing now is that people will often have like protests, but protests don't work. Direct action does work, right? And what's the difference? The difference is direct action um, seeks to intervene to stop an outcome from happening or to produce a specific outcome. Martin Luther King, for example, people will associate King with nonviolent protests. King never did nonviolent protests. King did nonviolent direct action, right? A boycott is direct action. That's what those are things that are designed to produce specific kinds of disruptive outcomes for capitalism, for imperialism. So think about how you can organize on the basis of your positions as students to disrupt. And I'll say this because I'm sitting in my office. It's our job as, faculty people at these institutions to provide cover for students. And I'm deeply, deeply disappointed by the failures of my colleagues who have exposed students to harm and who have not served as, kind of key organizing nodes. Just for me, I was organizing pro-Palestine liberation events starting on October 11th of 2023, because I thought it was important that I step out and provide cover and take heat for students. You guys shouldn't be doing this alone, but you should be doing it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was a really awesome answer. I want to be respectful of your time, Butch. We have about a half hour left before the workshop session's over, but maybe we got time for one more question if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I could take a question or two even.
Okay. Hey, okay, so I would like to hear about your experience running with the Green Party and how you think we should be building coalition between progressives and socialists and leftists to be able to build enough momentum to win seats, and yeah, how you've been inspired to address those challenges.
Yeah. It's a really important question. So it also kind of takes to I want to bring in one other kind of revolutionary counter voice. So George Jackson, another revolutionary hero, said when we engage in electoral politics to win rather than to disrupt, we discredit ourselves. And you'll hear a lot of revolutionaries quoting George Jackson in that sense, and not actually engaging with Malcolm or Huey or others. That there's this tension. Are you running to win or are you running to disrupt? And I just want to make this clear. I'm running to win. And the reason why I'm running to win is because I actually want to put state resources in service of the people. And I know that nothing is more disruptive to the system than an actual revolutionary winning. That produces like a crisis. So now how do we actually do that? And this is just, I'm just going to say this, and I know I'm not there to physically make eye contact with everyone in the room, but I'm going to create an imaginary circle of trust. Every single so-called leftist organization in the United States of America has failed and is actively failing on the front that you have addressed. None of them have been running to win. None of them have been competitive, and that includes the Green Party. And after I was invited into electoral politics and spent 11 weeks running for vice president, and that's all the time that I had. I was brought into the campaign in August, and the election was in November. I went to the Green Party National Steering Committee, and that was the first thing that I said. They asked me to address them, so I addressed them. And I said, this is a party that has been happy to be on the field, but has not been playing to win the game. When y'all brought me into this, you have to understand that is no longer going to be sufficient. We are going to have to actually think about how to challenge for wins. And that means coalition building that does not currently exist in this environment. And it means creating electoral coalitions that move outside of traditional leftist circles. If you put all of the so-called leftist organizations all into one single political party during the 2024 election, they're going to still get 2% of the vote nationally. And that is not going to cut it, right? So the campaign that we're running in the state of California, just to make this concrete, in order to actually have a chance at winning the election, you have to survive the jungle primary that the two-party system has imposed. So only the top two candidates will advance from a primary on June 2nd of 2026. So 6-2-2-6, right? The top two candidates are going to advance. And that was designed by this duopoly system to try to produce one red versus one blue so that no outside anti-capitalist option can actually participate. So we have to make that backfire, and that can backfire in an environment like California, where you have as many registered independents as you have registered Republicans. It actually makes Team Blue very susceptible to an attack from the left. Okay. Now, with that in mind, what kind of electoral coalition do you need to build in order to finish second? And what's going to happen if you finish second? Let's say I finish second. It means that me and whichever genocidal Democrat emerges as the top candidate are going to be in a one-on-one between June and November, a one-on-one where they can't say, oh, you're going to turn the state red. They can't use a lesser of two evils argument anymore. Right? So how do we get to that point? Well, second place historically in the California gubernatorial primary has only required between 15 and 21% of the vote. Most years it's hovered around 17%. 17% of the vote in a June 2nd primary is all that's between us and breaking the duopoly permanently. For context, only 5.5 million people voted in that primary in 2022 because they hide it in June where people aren't paying attention. But if we were actually able to build electoral coalitions, to speak to Latin American communities, to speak to the African American community, just the Muslim voters in the state of California, who, by the way, 53% of Muslim voters nationwide voted for the Stein-Ware ticket in the 2024 election. If we just got the Muslim voters in the state of California and added some small coalitions to that, we could easily get to 17%. But that's not going to happen just by building coalitions with PSL or with Peace and Freedom or other so-called leftist parties. It means making a direct appeal to a broader electorate. And this is the last thing I'm going to say in response to this. And this is also an important lesson that comes from history. I told you I was teaching a Pan-African Marxist revolutionary book club when I was 19. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, was one of the first Marxist texts that we read. I just recently read Walter Rodney's History of the Russian Revolution, published posthumously. And what I learned from reading that book in this particular moment was that the Bolsheviks, who end up directing the USSR after the collapse of Tsarism, this was a group that was never more than 250,000 people in 1917. But they were the group that had done the most active, effective organizing when the capitalist system collapsed. And why am I referencing that now? Because I actually don't believe that you win elections as an anti-capitalist or as a socialist by persuading everyone of the benefits of socialism before the outcome. No revolution has actually worked in that way. You never persuade the people to become socialist before the revolution. What happens is that the anti-capitalists and the socialists provide the best responses to the material needs of the people in a crisis of capitalism. The reason why I'm referencing that now is that the way that we get to that 17% is not by narrowly building coalitions with people that already know they're leftists. It's by running on universal health care, which 88% of Californians support. It's by running on rent control and rent freezes and taxing the shit out of Blackstone and BlackRock so bad that they can't wait to sell a bunch of vacant housing properties back to the state so that we can operate those at cost, just the way that Vienna operates 43% of the rental market by the municipality at cost, and that brings down rents and also gets the homeownership market under control. It's by providing practical solutions to the people's material needs. So if you go to the website, butchwareforgov.com, what's at the bottom is a line that people think is a throwaway line, but it's actually the whole of the coalition strategy. And what it says is solidarity beyond identity and ideology. See, the goal is not to get you to share every element of my personal political philosophy any more than it's to expect you to convert to my own personal faith tradition of Islam. That's not the goal. The goal is to actually build coalitions that are capable of providing for meeting people's basic needs in what is very, very obviously a crisis in terminal stage imperial capitalism.
That was really seriously great, Butch. Thank you so much. I do want to be able to, make some time for one of our key community organizers to discuss some of the work they've been doing and, making sure our elected officials actually, do what we want them to. So maybe time for closing remarks if you got anything for us.
I'm happy to get out of the way and make way for the people that are in the room. I think that the last thing that I would just say is that if you are interested in, actually, participating in this work in this moment, you can just go to the campaign website and get more information on how to do that. We're, like I said, trying to operationalize all of these lessons that come out of the Black liberation organizing tradition and essentially utilize the Green Party in this particular moment as the party that is capable of delivering on the material needs for people in the state of California. So that's what I'm trying to do. If that stuff makes sense to you, start a Campus Greens chapter. There where you are, I think we're up to now like 20 plus Campus Greens chapters across the state. And student involvement and engagement can be a crucial way to make a major intervention in this upcoming election.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, all power to the people, and great job organizing the workshops, guys. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for being here. It means a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
My pleasure. Wish I could have been there in person, but y'all are awfully far from Santa Barbara. So. Take care.
All right, have a good one.